I work as a trauma therapist, and so I feel like I have a pretty strong notion of what growing up in this kind of culture can lead to. But I wonder from the two of you what you might be able to say about how our world might have looked differently if we didn't see this massive movement of pushback in the 80s, 90s, and beyond.
To understand your context, pushback from whom?
Yeah, I guess what I am curious about is how we would see a difference in marriage rights, how we would see a difference in our understanding of gender and sexuality kind of writ large if we hadn't seen that massive movement that we're maybe now on the tail end of, or seeing just this new reincarnation of.
Well, it's interesting. I think not enough people took the threat seriously. We should have. But we're like, oh, come on, they're not going to come out. They're not going to do this. They're not going to go that far. They're not going to be that extreme. We saw this with Roe. What a great example. They're never going to overturn Roe v. Wade. It's settled law. The Supreme Court's already on record. It is what
years
it
of
is.
Precedent. And
right. And I think a lot of people disconnected from the battle, so to speak, because they thought, well, we've evolved. We've got gay marriage, and we've got these reproductive protections, and we've got all of these other things. And I think, were we naive? Were we simply disconnected and focused on other things, which is sort of the quote unquote sin of distraction? And I think that the events of the last few years have galvanized and produced a healthy anger and outrage that I believe is going to translate politically and culturally if we can maintain it. And it has not waned in the last 24 months. It has not gone away. It wasn't just a spike. People are still activated, galvanized, motivated, ready, organized, and organizing even further. And so I definitely think I may not even be answering your question, but what I'm trying to communicate is I do think people are now more than then taking the threat seriously. I'd like to think it's not too late, for us to reverse some of the damage, to stop the bleeding, to heal the patient. But I do, despite my heartbreak, and despite the fact that every freaking headline coming down the pipe is like a sledgehammer to the face, I do hold a little bit of optimism that perhaps sanity will prevail. And, that gets me through the day, for what it's worth.
How about you, Alice? Is optimism warranted right now? Is it okay to feel hopeful about, I don't know, are the kids all right? Are things moving in the right direction?
Well, I think it's always okay to feel hopeful. I think that as long as it's combined with not just hope, but I would never think that of someone like
you need more than thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
You need a little activism.
Yeah. But I do think that certainly where I'm encouraged, or I was briefly encouraged, then I was rapidly discouraged, was there was a Republican government person. I don't want to misquote his position, and I forget his name, but I believe he was in South Carolina, and he basically came out recently saying, like, I regret supporting pro-life policies because I didn't realize how they would affect women's health, and that women were actually going to die because of miscarriages they could not legally safely have, and they were expected to bleed to death and die of infection and things like that. I think a lot of people did not realize that this is going to affect so many more people than just people who can't wait to have sex until they're married. This is going to affect married, straight, good Christian women who will desperately want to be mothers. And I think unfortunately it's going to take it getting extremely personal for a lot of these policymakers and advocates to change their minds about this. And I think that a lot of them are going to learn the hard way. They are learning the hard way why this was such a bad idea. And I hope that maybe, this is where I have a little bit of hope, I hope that maybe going through the awful experiences that are to come might inspire just a little bit more human empathy and compassion for people in circumstances that are different than theirs, that maybe a little humble pie might lead to, I'm not in everyone else's shoes. I couldn't have anticipated the situation for myself and my family. Maybe, just maybe, I should err on the side of more individual bodily liberty than imposing my moral beliefs on people. I think it's a very sad way that hope has to come, but that's what it looks like to me, is it has to come through people learning the hard way what this is actually going to cost them. And maybe after then we might see a little bit of hope, but I'm not sure. That's the best I got in terms of hope.
Yeah.
I heard it. Was it Carlin, Alice? Was it Carlin who said inside every cynic is a frustrated idealist?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
I
it may
feel
have
that.
been, but
I'm like,
yes.
my cynicism is real, and I feel like a lot of it is born of I'm a frustrated idealist. I
Yeah.
used to see the best in people everywhere I went, and every day we're going to get better. And when you see so many of the people who hold the reins of power, who are now even more dangerous, they're like a wounded animal. As Andrew Seidel likes to say, they are faced with the impending death of their privilege. They're railing against their own demise culturally. They've become even more dangerous, and they're so freaking crafty. And I feel like we can't let hope die. We have to have, as Christy said, more than hope, more than this abstract sort of warm fuzzy, but allow our, this anger and hope to motivate us to participate in the culture in meaningful ways. And as Alice said, I think very personal ways. I think, we change the culture through stories. And I think it's the stories of many of the people who are being literally endangered and oppressed by this legislation, by this assault on human rights. I think the stories that are going to come out of this are going to be part of the weapons that we use to help try to reverse course correct, if you will.
Sure. Well, and the truth is, I do have hope. I mean, I've joked on the show before, and this is honestly true. We did a series of episodes last spring looking at Christian nationalism and some of these other movements. And I frankly got to a point where I just stopped asking people for forecasts and predictions of the future because they were bumming me the fuck out. And this was before Dobbs. This was before a lot of those things came to pass. But I do have hope because I know that this is the mother of all sampling errors, but I see it individually on person by person by person as they heal from some of this trauma and as they start to maybe regrow and create a new sexuality.